live on Facebook and Instagram. So welcome to all the people that are tuning in. Welcome to Queen's Curry Kitchen, my little tiny kitchen in Queens where we make curry. And just at the precise minute when we decide to go live, we have this lawnmower guy who insists that he gotta get it done today. You know what? I love people who love their work, so let him do what he needs to do, and we are going to do us. So today is a meatless Monday, and I've decided that from now on, every Monday, I will bring you a recipe that does not involve any meat. And it was a small change that I started out with, I think, 5 years ago. And because I'm in charge of cooking the meals for my family, I gradually cut down on the days on which I would or wouldn't make meat. So basically, what started happening was that the whole family kind of got into the cycle of they didn't miss it after a while. So I started to make my meals more flavorful, and these were little hacks that I did. And also in the course of a day, even if you decide to skip meat in one meal of the day, that would be nice too. So you can do all these wonderful little hacks. The thing that we're going to make today is a very, very simple flatbread. And instead of using flour, which is just gluten, or whole wheat flour, which is typically used for rotis, I am using a chickpea flour. So there's a very interesting story with chickpea flour that ties back to my dad and what he ate up until the last day of his life. This was one of his favorite things, but I will come to that later. Let's just get started with the recipe. If you saw the Instagram feed prior to the announcement of this video, then you must be familiar with all the measurements for the flour that we're going to use are in there. So I have some chickpea flour. This is also called besan, B-E-S-A-N. It's a light golden yellow colored flour, and it's a little bit grainy. So you can also buy it under Bob's Red Mill. I think they call it garbanzo bean flour, and it's got a slight aroma to it. It's kind of nutty, but it's got a very nice aroma to it. And there's an entire part of India, which is the western part, in Gujarat especially, where there's majority vegetarian people that live there. And if you look at their cuisine, they have used this flour in n number of ways, very creatively in everything possible, right from sweets to fritters to crepes to rotis to flatbreads to desserts to they even do like a baked cake kind of a version. It's called a handvo and dhokla. They do a lot of cool things with this. I'm just keeping it really simple, and what I'm going to do today is I'm going to use some leftover scraps of green onions that I had in my fridge. Now you can do this with any vegetable that you have, right? Hey, thank you. Learning How to Cook 101. That is our group on Instagram, but it's also a Facebook group. So if you want to learn anything, not just plant-based food, not just Indian food, you got to follow this Facebook group. They're awesome. So I'm going to use some scallions that I had left over in my fridge. You can use grated carrots, you can use zucchini. So every time you add a vegetable, you actually up the fiber content of your meal. And that's one way to actually make sure that you are in charge of the good cholesterol in your body. So whenever you can't cut down the fat on something, up the fiber. At least it helps to counter that, right? In terms of spices, I'm going to use some very simple things. Now whenever you use chickpea flour, you must always use something that is going to help you to digest it, right? So either use asafoetida or use carom seeds. I'll show you what carom seeds look like. They're used very widely in Indian food. So they're little tiny seeds that look like this, right? So these are the carom seeds. So always use something that is going to help to combat the flatulence. You could use grated ginger. You could use asafoetida. You can use, this is asafoetida. This brand that I use is called LG. If you can't find this in the Indian stores, just send me a DM and I'll be happy to ship it to you or have it in stock. Just a few pinches. I will also add some paprika, only because I just love the color. And I'm going to add some turmeric, right? I will add some freshly ground coriander powder. If you don't have any of this, you only have salt, honey, just do it with what you got, okay? Now chickpea flour by itself is a little hard to knead. So what I'm going to use is I'm using hot water. So whenever you have a flour that's gluten-free, it helps to bring hot water, stir it in, and then leave it for a few minutes, and then you can go in there. Since there's no gluten to kind of help to bind and make it flexible, it helps with the hot water. If you just throw in the hot water, let it rest for a bit, and then go in and work your magic. But for the purpose of this video, what I am going to do is I'm going to add a handful of whole wheat flour. only to make the kneading process easier. Now, personally, if you ask me, my journey with gluten has been kind of strange. So I'm not off gluten, but I'm going to actually turn the camera so you can see what's going on, right? So here is the chickpea flour. I added a handful of whole wheat flour. I added green onions and I added cilantro, right? So my journey with gluten is something like this. I don't really eat bread every day. Maybe once a week or something. I hardly eat any cookies. I don't eat any pasta, and I just don't like pasta, so that's a good thing. As for the rotis, I probably eat maybe roti 2 or 3 times a week. So my relationship with gluten is not that of a love-hate relationship, but I've seen that when I control the amount of gluten that I put in my body, immediately this part of my body kind of stays where it needs to be, which is inside. And I've seen that when I become careless with my gluten consumption and I'm constantly eating like bread or cookies or pasta or whatever, I can see the difference in my abs. Okay, so in goes. Now the proportion of water to flour is usually 1 cup flour to half a cup of water, but because this is a gluten-free flour and this water is hot, I'm just going to give it a good stir. Did I add the salt? Let me check. Nope. All right. What kind of chef is that? No salt. I'm using Himalayan pink salt, but you can use kosher salt, you can use sea salt, whatever you prefer, my darlings. So if you don't have a whole lot of time to make a lot of flatbreads or a lot of rotis in the week, just make a big stash and stick them in your fridge. They last really well. So basically the way you're going to knead this dough is you're going to gather it with your hands and see how sticky this is. That's because chickpea flour by itself by nature is a very, very sticky dough to knead. It's unlike if I were to knead the whole thing with whole wheat flour, right? So I'm just gonna scrape off my hands. Make sure your hands are very well washed. Do not have any long nails or nail polish when you're actually working with the dough or kneading the dough. Otherwise, just use the food processor. So I have a long list of things that I'm going to be making with this dough down the road. We will be making some dumpling dishes. We will be making some fritters. We'll make some desserts out of this. I actually just made fudge balls with granola and chickpea flour over the weekend, and they were really good. So you know, it's a very versatile dough. Also, the protein content is really high. So whenever you feel like you don't have mushrooms or something that you want to add to your breakfast dish, make something with chickpea flour. There's also another flour which is called lupin, Lupin, and I was just recently introduced to that. It kind of feels like chickpea flour, but it's a different kind of bean that it comes from, and it's pretty much got very similar values, and it's really high in protein. I've not seen it in stores, but I know that Amazon has it because that's where I got it. It's called Lupin. So even for something that has no gluten, I do the same thing. I add boiling water to the flour mixture, and then I let it sit. If you have a wooden spoon, you can use the back of a wooden spoon, just blend it in and just add a little bit. So you see, it just needs minimal kneading because there is no gluten that needs to be released. There is nothing that's going to help you to bring this together, right? Just quickly scrape off, clean up your pan. If you don't like a sticky mess, this recipe may not be for you. Okay. Alrighty. So we have a nice little ball here. I'm going to sprinkle some flour. Now, if you are gluten-free and you plan to make this, then even for sprinkling, you can use gluten-free flour. Don't use whole wheat flour like I'm using. Okay. And as an additional thing, you can also add different herbs of your choice. Like you can add dry fenugreek leaves. You can add grated ginger. Just make it your own. You know, don't feel compelled to make it exactly like how I'm making it. Okay. So this is what my dough looks like. Just rub it between your hands. My pan is nice and hot. I'm going to crank it up. Okay, so a lot of times what happens is people have a problem rolling out a dough that's kind of sticky, right? So here's my 2 cents. You can use parchment paper, or you can use a sheet of, you can cut up a Ziploc bag and you can use that. You can shape it with your hands, or you can shape it with a rolling pin. So we'll try to see what we can work with today. Since I'm using this flour to dredge it in, it's going to be a little bit easier for me. But if you were doing a 100% gluten-free version and only working with the chickpea flour, this might pose a challenge. So this whole trick of using parchment or... And also, did you know, just like you can make bread with batters, you can also make rotis with batter. And they're usually called chilla, so they look more like crepes. But if you're not good at handling dough, just make a batter of it and pour it and make it like a skinny pancake. So that's totally acceptable. It's still flat and it's a bread. So, stay flexible. But I would say just try to limit your gluten intake in a day. You're going to see a lot of changes in your body, for sure. Especially after your mid-30s. If you can control how much gluten you're eating or not eating, you'll see a cumulative difference. Like this whole thing going in, you'll see like within the first week or 10 days. It seems a little hard because you feel like, oh my God, then what am I going to eat? But imagine if you made a batch of these, or you made like corn rotis or something in the beginning of the week or on the weekend, and then ate it with different things for lunch, you'll be okay. Nobody ever died without gluten, right? Okay, so I did the parchment paper trick, and I think I probably pressed it too hard. Let me turn the Facebook viewers here so they can see what's going on. But I personally feel like I really don't have a problem just patting it directly on the skillet and then spreading it out with wet hands. And I'll show you that technique as well, even though the skillet is now going to be busy for a few seconds. Yeah, so going back to the story about chickpea flour and my dad, right? So my dad was a Punjabi who only, and if you didn't know Indian culture, then in India, every state, every region has its own food culture. Every family has its own food habits that they're passionately trying to protect. And the area of the country that my dad belongs to, really, they just eat pakoras, which is the fritters that are made out of this, and they eat sweets that are made out of chickpea flour. But when he moved to Calcutta as a school boy, when my grandfather actually moved to the city of Calcutta, they had a lot of friends who were vegetarian, like a lot of friends, right, who were vegetarian. And my father went to a special school which was only for Hindi-speaking kids in the middle of Bengali-speaking kids. So he grew up with them, and oftentimes after school he would go hang out with them. And in their house, every other thing was made with chickpea flour. So I think his early love with chickpea flour or besan started there, and it graduated, it evolved, his palate evolved greatly, right from moving away from just pakoras and fritters to enjoying typical things like gatte ki sabzi, which is, like the chickpea dumplings. He would enjoy the chila, which is like a savory crepe, and even till his last breath. So my father got diagnosed with oral cancer, and he got treated for that, so he had to have surgery. After he had the relapse after 3 years, they suggested radiation and not another surgical procedure. Strangely enough, I mean, it's the norm, but we couldn't tell him then. He lost all his saliva glands, right? So he couldn't tell the difference between tastes. All he could tell was whether something is sweet or salty. So, yeah, it was a journey and a half. But he was such a foodie that whenever my mom had to entice him to eat something, she would say, I'm going to make it with chickpea flour. And he would very happily eat it. And he would say, make sure you put a lot of cilantro. So he would actually smell his food and then just feel really good. Then finally, once he lost all his teeth, because they had become brittle, my mom would actually make these and then even churn them in the blender like baby food, and he would eat that. So to his last day on this earth, this was his favorite thing to eat. If you made anything with chickpea flour, he would be your friend forever. I think that was his grain of choice, right? So look, this is the other technique that I'm following. All I did was I dredged it into flour, and then I'm only spreading it out. So I'm not using parchment paper. My heat is high. When I see that it's ready to move around, that means one side is almost cooked, right? But it still has to have the brown spots to be considered fully cooked. You don't want to eat any raw rotis. And I'm very gently, with a very light hand, I'm going to go ahead and do this. So you can put grated garlic in this. You can put chives into this. Anything garlicky, anything with ginger, a light hand on the spices, tastes really good. Even coriander seeds, just roughly crushed in the palm of your hand with some crushed red pepper flakes, you can really do that. So this was a cup of chickpea flour, and I think it's going to make about, I would say about 4 rotis. 2, 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So if you just want to give it a try and you don't feel confident with working with an entire cup of flour, just follow the recipe prior to this post. You can download it, you can share it, and that way you can follow the exact proportion. I did keep a bowl of cold water handy so that in case I needed to pat it on the stove, I would actually take this ball, put it there, and then just pat it with wet hands and it would spread. So that's another way to work with gluten-free flours. If you'd like to see more recipes with gluten-free flours and oil-free recipes, you can always leave a comment in the chat, and I'll be very happy to incorporate those because every day I'm going to be doing a live video at noon. So this week is also free samples giveaway at Queen's Curry Kitchen, which means that you can order any samples for free. You just have to pay shipping. So there is a post that is going to be posted after this video, and you can see what are the samples we're offering. We're offering a chai masala, a masala chai mix. We are also offering Thai chili pickle. So the chilies are really super duper hot. I did a live yesterday. The pickle that I made, you can get a sample of that in your mailbox, and you can enhance your breakfasts and your lunches. When you have a meal of something with a homemade pickle and homemade yogurt, it actually completes the cycle of prebiotics and probiotics. Really good for your gut health. So try to make your own pickles. If you want to learn how to make pickles, you can leave me a comment. I would love to show them to you so that you can make your own. Right now I have carrots in brine, carrots and green onions that are brining right now. And I showed you the green chilies yesterday, the green chili pickle. Okay, so you can fry this with ghee. You can fry this with coconut oil. You can do oil, any oil of your choice. You can also leave them oil-free and just roast the two sides. And then remove them from the flame and add the whipped white butter. That's how they do it in the traditional, in the villages of India, where you want to eat a hearty breakfast and there's a cow and a buffalo in every backyard and there's so much butter and milk that's flowing freely. You make your own homemade white butter, but you can put vegan butter if you're vegan. Okay, so this is a very rustic kind of a bread, but it's also very filling because it's got you got your proteins for the morning. Trust me, you're not going to miss any eggs or whatever. And if you're new to vegan food, if you're new to plant-based food, if you're just trying to not eat as many animal proteins in your life, you could be at any stage. It doesn't matter. I'm also not 100% plant-based yet, but it's a journey. It's been 5 or 6 years. I'm on a journey. I cut down every day, little by little. So we all get there. So there's no room for hate. There is no room to judge anybody. Just allow yourself to be, and be patient with yourself. Just like you learned how to eat different foods in your life, if you're trying to cut down meat or chicken or fish or egg, that's also going to take some time to do that. Okay, so here is my, you see the little nice brown spots that are fully cooked. It's not very thick. You can see how thin it is. For all the bakers out there, if you want to bake it, give it a shot. Let me know how it turned out. I'm not much of a baker, but I think I'm more in love with the idea of baking rather than actually baking. You know how you are, when you're single, you're in love with the idea of being in love. So I'm kind of not a baker, but I'm in love with the idea of baking. That makes sense. I don't know. But yeah, that's just my reality. When someone says I'm not in love, but I'm in love with the idea of love, of being in love, I'm kind of somewhat like that when it comes to baking. Okay, so this is my second one going. I'm just going to give it a... So when you see all these bubbles coming up, you know that it's time to give it a flip, right? I'm just going to take a quick second and acknowledge all the people that I can see here. Taruna is tuning in. Jangam Gopi is tuning in. The Cozy Cook is here. And also Learn How to Cook 101 is here. Narita is here. Swanur is also tuning in. So welcome. M Rora 05. So welcome to Queen's Curry Kitchen. Namaste. I hope you can join me on my lunch table. So typically, let me talk about the pairings that go with this. Of course, the chili pickle that I showed you yesterday in the live, that's one of the classic pairings. But I don't like any heat in my food, so I don't really eat mirchi ka achar. That's what it's called. I really don't eat that. But if you want to sample, DM me. Just DM chili pickle, and my team will reach out to you for your address, etc. I personally like to combine the sweet and the salty, so I always like this with grape jelly or strawberry jelly and a nice hot cup of cardamom chai. So that's my favorite combination. My daughter always laughs at me and ridicules me because she says it's ridiculous how someone can eat something sweet and salty, but you know what? It's my favorite. Also, a nice cup of yogurt with a little bit of mint in it or a little bit of cilantro in it would be really good. That's a good pairing. So you can eat it with achar and yogurt. You can eat it just with white butter and chai. So many ways to do this. Now you see there are brown spots on this side. I'm going to just flip it over and see, get a sneak peek into what it looks like under here. So I just want to cook it for a little bit longer because even though it has brown spots, it's a little bit raw looking. You can see. So I just want to get it to get a few more brown spots. And for that, you can either press it down so it goes a little faster. I'm using a non-stick pan, but you can use a cast iron skillet. You can use what is traditionally called a tawa. Whatever you got, baby, you can use it. Right? So anyway, this is my journey towards cutting down meat one step at a time. And if you are trying to do any small steps in your day where you're trying to not eat as much meat, or if you came up with a hack where you're trying to trick your family where they think they're eating good but there's no meat or chicken or fish in your recipe, let me know how you did that. I'll just want to implement just some of your hacks, right? Okay, so I'm gonna go in and give this a final flip. So you saw the one that I made with parchment was really small because that's really not the technique that I usually follow. The one that I made with my hands was a little bit bigger. I'm a little more confident in that because I've just made too many, very many gluten-free breads in my life, and I've always done it either with my hands on the board or then directly on the skillet. And one of these days I'll be happy to show you that technique as well. Okay, so this is going down. You can hear the sizzle. Now, if this was a stove top, of course, it would go a lot faster, but I always tend to work in front of my window because the lighting is better, and under the stove, then I have to turn on the artificial light or whatever, right? So whenever you're trying to take inspiration for any kind of vegan food, vegetarian food, or plant-based food, what do? You actually look at regions of the world where they've been doing it successfully for generations, right, for centuries. So obviously, when I look at vegan vegetarian food, I really look towards the western part of India, which is Gujarat. I also look towards the southern part of India. So a lot of Tamil food, a lot of vegetarian options there. So they have been doing vegan vegetarian food for centuries. People have children, they are lactating mothers, nobody has any deficiencies, and how they do it because they balance their diet with augmenting grains, homemade food, and probiotics, prebiotics, sprouts. So I have some sprouts going that I put in. I might be doing a version of how to use that maybe either tomorrow or the day after, depending on whenever it sprouts up. I'll be happy to share with you. So I've actually sprouted some black garbanzos, which I'll be able to show you maybe tomorrow or the day after, depending on how they're coming along. Okay, so these are my breads that are done. You can see one is a little bit bigger than the other, but they're ready to serve. And I am going to do, of course, the famous taste test, right? What is life without a taste test? For which I must get a knife of sorts. And let's just cut it. It's nice and crunchy. So this is what it looks like, right? Nice and crunchy. It's almost very chip-like, but it's got a nice texture to it. Mm. Now, I didn't add any oil when I made the batter, so it's a little dry. If you're trying to avoid adding oil to the batter but still want to make a manageable dough, then you can add a little scoopful of yogurt into your chickpea flour and you'll get a soft dough. But because I'm gonna pair this with chai, so good. I'm not really gonna miss the moisture of it, and usually it tends to dry up. So it's good if you use yogurt. It's going to make a nice soft bread for you. Also, the carom seeds come through really perfectly. You would think that the scallions would actually create a texture in your mouth and you would get a mouthfeel for it. You actually don't, because those scallions are very beautifully blended into the dough. It's a great mouthfeel. You do get a taste of the carom seeds. You don't taste the asafoetida. It's not overpowering. Everything just works very beautifully, and it's a great breakfast or lunch. And if you make a big batch of these, you can probably enjoy them all week long. If you want to store them in the fridge, then don't fry them. Just roast them on both sides and stick them in the fridge, and that way you can enjoy them whenever you want. You can either spray them with cooking spray and then put them on the skillet, or you can char them on your stove top, and you can serve them with your favorite dal or sabzi or vegetable or even the pickle, right? So with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Be flavorful, be blissful, and join me again tomorrow as we crack yet another recipe from the Indian repertoire. Until then, keep smiling, keep shining. It's not over yet, but you know what? That doesn't mean we're not going to live our life. So do what you need to do, but don't go anywhere. I'll see you back again tomorrow at noon. Keep a lookout for the next recipe that you're going to see. It will be announced at 11 tomorrow. And so you'll know that you have to be here at noon. Like always, thank you so much for joining me. Again, a quick reminder, there is a free samples week this week on our website, but you would have to DM me because I'm not listing individual items as free on the website. You can just send me a DM or a personal message and you can sample all the things that you would like. So whether it's the chai, whether it's the chili pickle, or then it's the chickpea fried snacks, you can definitely DM me. I will be putting up a post and you can see what the items look like. You only have to pay for shipping, which is $4.99, and I can ship all over the US. With that, I'm going to take leave. If you want to learn anything that you saw today, you can take a class. All the class information is on the website, queenscurrykitchen.com. Like always, keep smiling, keep shining, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.